What's the purpose of your business? And which is really like, what's that world which you want to create? Liquid Death is a fantastic brand, and you think about what they sell really expensive water. They sell cans of water for $8 USD. It makes no goddamn sense why someone would buy that product, but yet they have a multi-billion-dollar valuation.
Sure.
And the reason why is because they're not selling the product, they're selling the feeling about buying the product.
Is AI truly ready to power your creative wheelhouse?
It's come a long, long way. But at the same time, it still needs that human involvement. It's really useful to help bring an idea to life, but you still need that idea, because a lot of what AI comes up with is very generic. And I think it's that vibes, that feeling, which AI can't do yet. And I hope it can never do.
Mal, incredibly excited to have you on the podcast. I feel like this one's going to be pretty high energy, and I'm excited for that.
What would give you that idea, Liam?
Well, it's just you, Mal. You're a very energetic person, which I think so many people love, and constantly a very positive light in the world of e-com and brands here in Australia, which so many people have come to know you for.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Your advice and perspective on things are, I think, very well respected, and I think something that's makes you stand out is that you're not just a advisor. In many ways, you've been through the trenches yourself, and I'm excited to go through that today and your story. You need very little introduction. I think you're quite well known here in Australia, and you speak at almost every stage that brands would have the chance to see you throughout the year. But I think it is worth an introduction. I think that you spend a lot of your time helping brands on their journey, and maybe people don't know as much about you. So maybe that's a good place to kick it off. Who are you, and what's kind of the high level journey?
Yeah, look, so right now I'm a fractional chief marketing officer, which means that I work with about half a dozen different brands on helping them unlock growth. So brands who are typically doing like 7 figures plus, so mid to high 7 figures and up, really helping them understand what is it which is perhaps stopping them from growing to the next level, and then really working them across analytics, insights, strategy to unblock that. And then the other hat I wear currently is that I'm one of the co-founders of Ecom Nation and the managing director, which is a performance marketing agency for e-commerce brands. So we've been around for about 4.5 years now, working with about 28 clients across multiple verticals. But I've been working in digital marketing for as long as I can remember, probably since my early 20s. I built my first website when I was 14 years old. And that was just a curiosity with this whole thing called the internet. I'm 45 now, so...
No Shopify. You would have had to do it yourself,
No Shopify.
Right?
It was all hand-coded.
Yeah.
And I remember wanting to understand how it worked and discovering that you could look at the source code. So I would copy and paste the source code from websites, and it was just straight HTML then, into Notepad, and then just change different elements. I'd read it and try to decipher what things meant. And then I realized that if I changed something there, I could then reload that same text file, HTML file, in a browser and see what change I made. And that kind of got me hooked onto like, well, what else can you create? How can you make like, the running ants around stuff? How do you make like things bold? How do you do all these different things from a stylistic point of view, before I started getting into like databases and how to like inject different elements into a website. And that was just born out of just curiosity to understand how this wide world, this new world of the internet and online worked.
Yeah.
But after that, I was kind of hooked into that. I did a bit of a foray into music. When I left school, I had no intention of getting a quote-unquote real job. I just wanted to be a DJ. So I left school, became
I was
a
interested
DJ.
to hear that. One of your first moves was being a DJ, right?
Yeah, it was. I've always been obsessed with music. I played in bands. I played the guitar, played piano, used to play the violin, and I sang as well. So I naturally started a heavy metal band back at school. But then I also started DJing as well and getting into like hard techno. And from there, I kind of just had this love of just like mixing and DJing and playing to a crowd, which then made me go, well, do you know what? I don't want to work behind a desk. I looked at my older friends, I looked at my dad who was an accountant. I said, that life's not for me. So I left school and decided I was going to become a DJ. And I did that for a number of years, did multiple jobs in that space, ran some nightclubs, worked for some large festival promoters like Future Entertainment, Stereosonic, to help run events, to help promote the events, and all DJing on the side. But it was kind of through that I realized that the part which I was really enjoying the most was actually the running of the events and the marketing of those events. So I made that call then that I would focus on marketing. I didn't even know what marketing was at the time till a friend of mine said, "Oh yeah, that's a marketing you like." And he worked
And
at
it was
Diageo.
still like a bit unknown. I mean, there was so many new ways of promoting brands and etc. at that point, right?
And at the time, for me, what I enjoyed about it most was that you're creating a connection with your customer, your potential customer anyway, which I actually found very similar to DJing, because what I loved most about DJing was I hated doing like short festival sets, like 30, 45-minute sets. They were kind of a waste of time. But I loved playing the long sets, like 3 hours, 5 hours, Sunday mornings at a recovery, a 5-hour set. I love that because you got to take the dance floor and the audience on a journey. And really figure out, how do you like play with their emotions? How do you wind them up? How do you dial them down? How do you build them towards, an epic breakdown? And I found marketing was the same, because it's about connecting with people. And when I realized that was the bit which I enjoyed, I decided to go back to uni, finish my half-finished undergraduate degree, and straight away went into a master's in marketing. And then from there, had the very good fortune to start working on some very large events. I worked at the Adelaide Fringe, which is the largest arts festival in the Southern Hemisphere. And then from there, worked in a number of other jobs, such as I was general manager at Fresh FM, which is a youth radio station in South Australia. I became the head of digital at University of Adelaide. And then really started focusing on digital marketing. And since about 2025, my main focus has been in digital marketing, and worked at agencies and got to experience a lot, from like the services side of things, from working on government, from building apps, to really focusing on e-commerce. And e-commerce was something which I then really fell in love with, probably like in the early 2010s, because the ability to see the immediate fruits of your labor, in a way where you can see that immediate conversion. Whereas I was working in some services business, I worked at some tech startups, and the long sales cycle where you'd get in leads and things like that, it just wasn't very satisfying. But there was something about that immediacy of e-commerce where it's like, oh wow, I can add instant value straight away. And from there, I really haven't looked back.
I was, as I said before this podcast, I was looking back on my LinkedIn messages from 4 years ago when we were just launching Instant and Instant Checkout, and you're at a company called Riderware at the time. And you're pretty transformative in the growth story of that business. I think scaling it 4 times in revenue while you were there, which is obviously incredible. And then more recently, you're working with a bunch of very fast growing brands here in Australia, at very different stages, very different founders, very different products. What do you think are the traits of the fastest growing companies right now?
Right now, the fastest growing companies are the ones who have operational discipline and focus more than anything else. I think those are 2 things which a lot of brands which grew really fast through COVID have kind of lost, because they kind of spread themselves a little bit too thin, whereas the ones who are doing really well know exactly who they are. They know exactly what they're about. They know who their customers are, and they know what their products need to be to meet the needs of their customers. That discipline then translates into results, because you've got that focus behind everything which you do, rather than a lot of brands who grew a lot over that period and have lost that because they've tried to expand into different categories. They're trying to go omni-channel. They're trying to do a lot of things which don't really align back with what their mission is, what their primary focus is.
What's the process to getting focused? I think a lot of people say they have focus, but you start to dig into their business and it's like, hang on, you are all over the place. Omni-channel, new markets, new products, new team, new revenue goals, not aligned in the business. Everyone wants something different.
Look, for me, it really starts to what I call your brand foundations. Your brand foundations are, what are your purpose, your promise, and your principles. And if you think about like a triangle going from the top, it's like, what's the purpose of your business? And which is really like, what's that world which you want to create? When you think about the impact which you want your business, your brand to have in the world, what is that going to be? And then thinking about, okay, well, how then does that translate to what I do, which is the promise, which is really about, from an e-commerce perspective, then what sort of products do you bring to market? And then from there, the bottom layer is the principles, which are essentially the underlying principles around how you then go and operate. I think a lot of brands who I work with, when I start working with them, they don't really understand that, because they're just doing a lot of different things. We're in sleepwear, we're in luxury watches, we're in leather goods, and they think that's just what they do. But then it's that emotionality about why you do it, which people really connect with. So from a very young age, as a marketer, I realized that brand is super, super important. When I first got into digital, I was seduced by the fact that you can measure everything. So part of my brain went, oh, wow, you can measure that. We should only do things which we can measure. But as I started to think about it even more and more, and people became more and more obsessed with things like ROAS, it occurred to me that, hang on, if we're only measuring the things which work, how do we measure the things how do we know that the things which we can't measure or are unmeasurable aren't working?
Sure.
And there was a saying which I heard, which was that not everything that can be measured matters, and not everything that matters can be measured.
And it's become, this whole brand movement is becoming a very interesting time in terms of when to start focusing on it. You've got a whole cohort of brands who don't get the foundations right, start focusing on brand and just pile money into the ether. But then you've got this other, and the majority of brands that have done it right, and they're just scaling like never before. You know, you speak to someone on the street, oh, this brand is so amazing, and everyone's talking about it, and every influencer's talking about it, whether it's in brands or even like tech startups. I mean, if you crack brand and win the awareness game, that's what I always say to the team. Like, we have to win the awareness game. For step one, for someone to buy your product, they need to know about you. And a lot of brands just go to step 2, step 3, step 4. When do you actually start focusing on brand though? Like, what's step 1?
Right from the start. For me, it's right from the start. Like, I think like fundamentally, before you start ordering products, before you start developing go-to-market plans, before you start designing and building your website, you need to understand what your brand is about. And then everything flows back to there. For me, everything ladders up to what your brand is. Everything needs to be aligned, with exactly who it is. Because
what does brand mean though in your mind?
Brand is essentially what people think about you. It's what people say about you. That is your brand. It's not what...
I think a lot of people confuse brand with creative, and it's not that.
No. A lot of people jump to a logo, first of all, and go like, okay, well, that's the logo.
I have
that's
a brand.
The brand. Yeah, exactly. But you don't. You've got a logo. The brand is actually what sits behind it. It's what that logo represents. It's what the design of your website represents. It's what your products represent. And it needs to have meaning to it as well. So going back to the first thing is about people knowing who you are, absolutely. But it's also knowing what you're about. As well. It's one thing to have like a brand which everyone knows, but you also need to stand for something, particularly in a very crowded marketplace.
What's a brand that stands out that's done this really well? I think top of mind for me, more on the community side of things, and then more recently brand is, say, LSKD. They've been investing in incredible content, community right from the start. They've been using their stores in person as a way to kind of foster that community when so much of their purchases or customers are online. What about you?
Where do I start? There's so many great brands, I think. If I'm going to use a non-Australian example, I think the biggest one which has really popped off, I guess, in the last few years has probably been Liquid Death.
Yes.
So Liquid Death is a fantastic brand. And you think about what they sell. They sell really expensive water. They sell cans of water for $8 USD. It makes no goddamn sense why someone would buy that product. But yet they have a multi-billion-dollar valuation. And the reason why is because they're not selling the product, they're selling the feeling about buying the product, right? Because if you look at anything which you buy, it's a bit of a placebo. Because if we are buying the product for its utilitarian value, like a t-shirt, for instance, you wouldn't pay more than $5 for a t-shirt. But yet you can see streetwear brands who sell a t-shirt for $100+ because they're not selling the utility. They're selling the emotion behind that. And the emotion is a placebo because the product doesn't actually do that.
Ralph Lauren, I mean, $90 for a t-shirt, more.
Exactly.
Is it really worth that? But people buy the logo.
Yeah, and that's how you need to stand out in this market. And I think Liquid Death did an incredible job with that because they went, you know what, we sell water and iced tea, but we're going to be like super edgy. We're going to appeal to that underground, hardcore, skater, heavy metal type crowd. We're going to collaborate with Tony Hawk. We're going to collaborate with Ozzy Osbourne and just do like insane things with them to get that brand awareness and that brand salience. So I think they've done an incredible job. Closer to home, one of the brands I work with, Muscle Republic, over the last couple of years, have grown massively in a very, very crowded category. They've been around for a long time. They've been around for 11 years now, but it's probably in the last 2-3 years where they've really become a household name. And that is because they focused on brand. They stopped focusing on the product and they're focused on what actually makes Muscle Republic Muscle Republic.
Absolutely. I mean, Muscle Republic is a perfect example. Like we work with so many nutrition type brands in Australia, Elite Supplements, Nutrition Warehouse, all of them.
Yep.
And more recently, Muscle Republic, we work closely with. And something that stands out with a brand like Muscle Republic is their obsession with experimentation. And I think that's one of the traits of the fastest growing brands at the moment is their obsession with experimentation, whether it's new tech, brand, community, new products, Black Friday, Cyber Monday campaigns, the agencies they work with, the people they bring on the team. Like they've got this obsession with experimentation. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think a lot of brands just take the safe bet. They take the safe path. What are your thoughts on experimentation when it comes to growing fast?
As long as I can remember, since my very first marketing manager position, I've always allocated a percentage of the budget towards experimentation.
Yep.
If it's part of the advertising budget, let's carve out 10% and always be looking for what's the next thing. Because fundamentally, by the time you start doing something which is working, it means everyone else is doing that as well. Which means you're competing against a whole lot of people. So you always need to maintain that edge, particularly in marketing, which is why one of my big bugbears right now is the sameness of people's creative, where people will run ads and they'll say, oh, well, that other person did that ad. It seems to be working really well. I'll do that style of ad as well. The problem with that, though, is that if they're doing that, it means other people are doing that too, which means your ads now look like everyone else. But fundamentally, the whole thing about marketing is about how do you stand out? And you don't stand out by doing the same things as other people, which means that experimentation piece is absolutely crucial for any brand which is going to look to continue to grow, because eventually you're going to kind of hit that plateau if you're not looking for where do we go next with our tech stack, with our marketing, with our messaging, with our advertising channels. Eventually it's going to plateau. So you always do need to be looking, at what's ahead.
Is there on the creative element and that side of things, that's just one example on the kind of experimentation. But let's take that and go, is there a ritual or a routine that you stick by or recommend to get these this creative energy flowing? Because it's one thing to say, it's so hard to be different. It really, really is. And I think a lot of brands, I think copying is the wrong word, but they get a lot of inspiration from, say, what the larger brands are doing or what the brands that have larger teams are doing, or, the TikTok video that went viral. They're just getting inspiration from it and doing it again, right? But how do you be the first mover?
That's a great question. I've thought about creativity for a long time, for many, many years now. I've read a lot of different books around creativity. And I think there's no real process to it. A lot of people in creative roles may try to post-rationalize and say, well, we did this and then we did this ideation stage, and then we got all these ideas out on the board, and that's how we came up to this big idea. But I think the reality of creativity is that you need to actually step back from it. And for me, it's understanding what the problem is, which we're trying to solve. Fundamentally, what's that human kernel of truth which we need to unlock in order to for our campaign to succeed, and then really stepping back from it and drawing inspiration from a lot of different sources. So for me, I consume a lot of media. I consume a lot of art, music, film, to try to get inspiration from what's working, what's a really good idea, and then not forcing it and just letting it just sort of sit and marinate until something kind of just strikes you. I think in our space, in the e-com space, we always look for quick fixes, which is where you end up with a lot of people copying because, well, we want an ad which works. But like we said before, an ad which works means that it works for them. It's not necessarily going to work for you. So I like being able to just stepping back, letting the ideas, just flow and just kind of connect the dots in my brain, and with the team. One of the
biggest problems with creative today is that I think a lot of brands relied on static creative that someone could, whip up behind the desk, and, there was not much human involvement outside of one person. It was just let's just pump through some creative. Obviously, the best brands didn't do that entirely, but almost every brand now is required to build content that is personal, TikTok videos, influencers. It's now all of a sudden gone a lot more, takes a lot more time, energy, effort, ideas. You have to be first, you have to be funny, you have to be creative, you have to be, this huge push to be founder first in the content. And, people start to buy into the founder journey, like Brittany Saunders at Fate the Label. I mean, she's an expert at it, which is just one example.
Liam at Instant as well.
Well, I try. But what do you think is like, that if you were a founder tomorrow starting a brand, or you had a brand that was, $10 million of revenue and had, like, you're just starting to really get into TikTok, for example, or this trying to build a founder brand that drives growth. What's like the recipe for success? People, the types of content, like would you bring people on the team? Like how do you think about it? Because a lot of brands don't do it because it's like, fuck, where do I start with TikTok? Like where do you start?
Yep. I first of all start when I think about creative. I think about it like a matrix.
Yep.
First of all, if you look at a matrix where your columns are your different content pillars. So essentially, like, what themes do I need to be talking about which are unique to my brand? There are some things which are universal, things like brand story, problem solution, product benefits. But then beyond that, what are those things which are specific to us and our key messages? And again, this ladders up to what I talked about before. With your brand foundations, with your purpose, promise, and principles. Once you understand your themes, then you think about what are the different types of content which I could create. I could create statics. I could create founder content. I could create EGC. I could create UGC, influencer content. And then you think about, well, how then does that come to life in each one of those boxes in that matrix? That's always where I start, and then think, okay, well, then how do I then tweak this for each different channel? If I've got this one video, how do I make that video sing on Instagram Reels? But then also, how do I do an edit, which is going to work really well on TikTok?
Yep.
It could be the same content, but just remixed in different ways.
Yep.
So that's how I like to think about it, where content starts first with like, what are we trying to create? And then
is it worth the investment of
it.
bringing someone on the team to own it?
I think at some point you do.
Yeah.
Again, everything starts with your budget, right? Like if you can't afford it, you need to do it yourself, or you need to have a marketing team which is really, really scrappy. I think one of the skills which is super important for marketers now is to have that ability to just go out and create content.
Yep.
Particularly as teams, become leaner and leaner and leaner, it means that you can't always outsource things as well. Your operating costs are going up, utilities, everything else. You've got margin pressures happening. So you need to actually think pretty lean. And I think a lot of marketers are still afraid to get out in front of the camera. And I think founders are as well, because it is scary. It's putting yourself out there.
Absolutely.
But you need
But
to.
people buy into the story and the journey. And that's the most powerful brand.
Yep.
Is when you have someone that trusts who the brand is.
Yep.
But this kind of drags me into the whole world of AI, which is obviously what everyone's speaking about now. And there's a particular debate on the creative side of things when it comes to AI. What's your thoughts there? Like, is AI truly ready to power your creative wheelhouse, or is it just not yet?
I think it's still got a ways to go. There's probably another 12, 18 months to go. And look, the AI, the Gen AI models are getting better. When you look at things like Gemini Nano Banana Pro, that's creating some amazing visuals now. Even Sora 2 compared to what Sora 1 could do. It's come a long, long way. But at the same time, it still needs that human involvement. It's really useful to help bring an idea to life, but you still need that idea. Because a lot of what AI comes up with is very generic.
Yep.
And you can tell that. You can see the Coca-Cola commercial, the Christmas commercial, which came out about a month or so ago, was really friggin' boring.
Yeah.
It was so slow and it was so generic and it just didn't really excite you. It kind of ticked the boxes. And if you knew it was AI, you'd be like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yep.
But if you actually looked at it as being a Coca-Cola ad compared to some of the creative. Exactly.
Yep.
And so in that aspect, AI definitely is not ready yet because it can't come up with that originality. It can't come up with that thing which is going to move you. I'm a big music guy. I listen to a lot of really heavy music, metalcore, deathcore, anything heavy, I listen to it, right? And that's starting to permeate the music scene a lot more with a lot of AI music. But
I was surprised to see Spotify isn't releasing any AI music.
Yeah.
Or if they try to find it, but they've struggled to actually identify
and
music that is AI
Well, there was
generated.
something last week where a really well-known band, allegedly came out with a new song. I think it was Architects, but it was an AI song. It sounded a little bit like them, but it just wasn't quite the same.
Yeah.
So AI, someone had released that It was AI generated and put it under the architect's name, and it came out. But it just didn't sound like them. And I think you can tell that if you listen to an AI song enough, like at first glance, you may think, oh yeah, that's pretty good. But when you really start digging into it, you listen to the chords, you listen to the layers, you listen to the lyrics, it just doesn't feel right.
Yep.
You know, and I think it's that vibes, that feeling, which AI can't do yet. And I hope it can never do.
What do you think are the biggest shifts going into 2026? Obviously, there's, things like influencer marketing are massive today. Will that change? Is kind of the foundations of getting your website right and your core marketing on Meta right starts to be all of a sudden become the most important thing again? Is it profit? Is it growth? Is it like what are you kind of thinking is like the biggest shifts you're hearing at the moment from brand founders?
One big one, which is coming up for the last several months anyway, is just being AI ready.
Yep.
So ensuring that your product pages, your product is going to be visible when someone is going to an AI chatbot and asking for a recommendation, making sure that you're visible there. So I think that's something which every brand needs to start thinking about. Preezy's
doing some amazing work there. I've been you go onto some websites now and you can all of a sudden start to chat, like as if you go into JB Hi-Fi and start asking someone questions. You can now all of a sudden do that on a website. It's crazy. I think sometimes people over-engineer what AI means. And it's like, hang on, let's just start basic and start to give people the experience that they want. Consumers the experience they expect in store, online, by being able to speak to someone.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think people look at AI and we kind of go towards what we think the end is going to be rather than focus on, well, what's that thing you can help us with and do better now?
Yes.
Right? So going back to the creative example, it's like, how do you start experimenting with AI to help improve different elements of it? How do you take a product image, for instance, and change the background? And there's some great tools out there. Meta and Google have inbuilt tools now which will allow you to change the background of a product image. And that's fantastic. That's just like a really small thing which you can do. It's not creating the whole thing. You still need to provide the product image, but it just puts it in different scenarios. But I think, in terms of big trends, the AI readiness one is a big one. Profitability is becoming more and more important. I think people starting to realize now, and I think coming through this recent Black Friday peak period, you're going to see in the next few months a lot of brands who probably don't make it because they were really relying on this 1 month to save their entire year. And I was saying this to someone before, we have this, as retailers, we fetishize this 1 month at the expense of the other 11 months of the year. And we put so much focus on that. But I'm hearing more and more of brands who are going like, holy shit, like our Black Friday was good, but it wasn't good enough to cover all the mistakes which were made for the last 11 months.
Out of the brands that you're working with or just brands in market, what's kind of the average of brands relying on Black Friday in terms of their annual revenue? Is it like 30%, 40% of their revenue? Or?
The brands I work with, generally it's less than 30%.
Right. And that's important to make sure that's the case. Otherwise, it's just you're relying too much on 1 month of the year.
And I hear about brands who are putting about 70%.
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, I know so many brands, it's like 40%, 50%, and they just talk about it like it's a normal thing. And it's so unpredictable. And bad. Yeah.
And look, and I think that's people are kind of starting to realize that as retailers, that running the engine that hard for 11 months of the year, expecting 1 month to kind of cool it down and pay it off is just unrealistic. It's unsustainable. And there's a lot of brands who I think are going to feel that over the next coming months once they clear all their debts. So I think that focus on profitability is going to be a really big one. And I've been saying this for a couple of years about brands actually just starting to think how to be more operationally efficient in what they do. And that means understanding your unit economics. It means understanding your operating expenses. It means understanding like how do we actually run a sustainable business?
Yes.
As well.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
it's interesting to see the AI obviously becoming. It's gone from being spoken about as a hypothetical to holy shit, it's here. And so many people speak about, all right, we got to start embracing it. As a brand, where are you recommending? Or as someone that's working with brands, where are you recommending brands start?
That's a good question. Depends on the brand. Like everything, there's no real one-size-fits-all answer. It really depends on where your need is. If you need around like data analysis, then absolutely start using it for data analysis. Start using it to kind of help with those things. probably the best place
a lot of the wasted
Mm-hmm.
human time in critical information that you should know about your business, whether it's like analytics, data, customer support, solving shipping problems, and like just wasted human time is super important that it's done, but it doesn't need to be someone's time, so they can spend that time on something more impactful.
Yeah, like a lot of what I do from a marketing standpoint is like, how do we get speed to insights?
Right.
How do we get speed to insights using AI so that we can actually start taking action and developing strategy off that insight?
Yes.
As well. So part of it could be as simple as developing a custom GPT, which will take inputs from customer interviews, which is a project which I'm doing now with one of my clients, where I'm interviewing several customers each week over a set of questions.
Like people that have shopped on the website.
People have shopped on the website, but also non-shoppers as well.
Okay.
Loading all of that with the transcript into AI and having AI just analyze that on an ongoing basis and pull out what those insights are. And then providing a weekly, a monthly report just with how that trend is shifting over time as I speak to different customers. So that's just like a simple use as well.
How are you? What does that project look like? So you're recording it using.
I'm recording using Fireflies.
Okay.
So recording using Fireflies, getting the transcript from Fireflies, uploading that into the custom GPT,
and then that's analyzing it.
That's analyzing it and pulling out all the key themes, and then there's the output is then a spreadsheet, which it then puts in new rows with insights as it goes.
And what types of questions do you ask these customers?
Yeah, so it ranges from starting with, first of all, what's their attitudes towards a category? So when they're buying this particular category, how do they typically shop? Why are they shopping? Essentially understanding how high involvement or low involvement that category is. Then going into their experience buying from that brand, what it was like, why they chose that brand, did they evaluate any other alternatives, and then going through that whole process, understanding the satisfaction with it, and then just finding out just more about who they are as well.
And it's proving to be pretty valuable?
Yes, extremely.
Yeah, right.
Extremely. This is actually a project which I did at RideAware. So when I was the chief marketing officer at RideAware,
manually though.
Manually, yes. There was no AI at the time. I made a point of every single week of getting the CX team to find me one person to interview, and would give them $100 RideAware gift card. Okay. And just say, here's a $100 gift card. You just need to speak to our CMO for 45 minutes.
Yep.
And it was the most amazing
you just reach
experience.
out to someone that shopped or hasn't purchased or abandoned or whatever.
Yep, exactly. And they just reach out to them, and every week I spoke to a new customer, and I'd share those insights back with the executive team, back to the marketing team, and it was all about just building up this profile about who our customer is. Because I think one thing which a lot of marketing teams and a lot of founders lack now, or again afraid of, is potentially actually speaking to the customer. You speak to a lot of brands and they'll
say,
think
that I can't, they won't want to speak to me, or they'll find it weird reaching out, or but it's also a good proof point of whether are these shoppers that are purchasing or have purchased 4 or 5 times, are they brought into the community of your brand, or are they just purchasing because they like the product, or is it cheap? Why do they truly like you?
And it's about validating, but it's also invalidating as well, your assumptions about them, because ultimately that's where you start with a whole bunch of assumptions. And when you speak to founders or retailers who say, we know the customer, we know the customer, or we are the customer. It's worse when they say, well, we are the customer. It's like, actually, you're not the customer. You have no idea about the customer. You need to find that inside out so that you can best serve them.
What's the most interesting insight you've gotten from speaking to a customer?
Probably with,
that you didn't think that was like fresh.
With one of the brands, it was really shifting who we thought our competitors were and where they saw us in market. With this particular brand, they had been going for a number of years with this assumption that this is who our customers also buy from. This is our competitive set. But when I started speaking to the customers, it very quickly was like they actually saw something different, and they were perceiving the brand in a different way than what the marketing team were actually going out to market with. That insight alone unlocked something like 200% growth over the period of a couple of years, because they were able to shift everything which they did to go like, well, that's actually not how people see us. So let's stop playing here and let's start playing here, because people actually see us as a high quality option, not a very kind of mid-tier stuck in the middle.
Yeah, we're not tier 3. We're let's start seeing ourselves as tier 1, because that's the way everyone else is seeing us.
Exactly. With those particular customers. So it was that mindset shift which changed everything about how we approach product, with how we approach marketing, everything about the brand.
What's your unique thoughts on what the most common things that brands get wrong, or they just continue to fail at, that, you generally come into a business and there's a consistent trait of things that brands get wrong?
Trying to grow from paid media alone, from
Right.
advertising alone, is probably the biggest killer of brands today. When you start off a brand, there's this temptation to start pumping a lot of money into your ads to generate sales, and that's a
Yes.
very natural assumption to want thing to want to do. But the problem is that if you rely just on advertising, as soon as you turn that advertising off, your sales will also go along with
Yes.
it.
Yep.
One of the undeniable laws about advertising is that it gets more expensive every single year. CPCs do not go down. Meta and Google are not going to reduce the cost of your ads overnight. On average, they go up 20% every year,
Yep.
which means that if you're spending 30% of your sales on advertising, next year, if you don't change anything, it's going to be 36%.
Right.
So you can't rely just on advertising alone. That needs to be part of the marketing mix. And when people see marketing as just being advertising, I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. The marketing is
What's
is
the
much more
alternative?
than
Is
that.
it focusing on things like brand,
It's-
like you mentioned before, or?
Yeah, brand is one of the things. Well, brand is the thing which sits above it all, which everything ladders up to that. But it's first of all understanding, do you have product market fit? Do you have customers who will organically buy your product because they see it and it's going to solve a problem for them? Now, by no means am I saying don't spend anything on ads, but don't pump everything you have into ads. At the end of the day, you still need to run some level of advertising to get people to your website, unless you are very active on social, unless you are doing lots of events or you're doing a lot of things in the market to generate that awareness to bring people so that people will come to your website. So you're always going to need to do a little bit of ads, but it's understanding is that customer converting? What is actually working, which is resonating with your customers, and then scaling that with ads.
And then further to that, I think another trend at the moment that is super positive is the amount of shoppers that are returning. Returning shoppers seem to be, the most valuable shopper. Second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time, they're just coming back. How are you thinking about that amongst your brands?
Funny enough, yes, retention is important. I'm not going to deny that. And I know I'm sitting in a retention marketing tech company, but it's also not as important as people think.
Okay.
I'm a big believer in Byron Sharp's How Brands Grow, where he talks about the fact that, yes, your very loyal customers are important. They're going to keep coming back over and over again if you've got the right product for them and you've got that really good fit there. But if you really want to grow, you actually need new customers.
Yes.
So that's something which you can't turn the tap off on. So you should absolutely be...
A lot of brands,
retain.
I think, should just put retention on autopilot. Like, this is our strategy. These are our goals. This is what we're going to do. We need to remove the distraction. So many brands get distracted about retention because it is an important part of their business. I mean, it's a significant chunk of their revenue, right? But it's a distraction at the same time from growing. If you're just relying on the same customers to come back all the time, that's going to dwindle, and it's just naturally going to dwindle, right? And you just, you're not growing at hyper velocity.
Yeah.
It's like, let's put it on autopilot and let's get rid of it, the distraction, and focus on growth.
Unfortunately, I actually see a lot of brands like that who come to me. And typically when a brand comes to me, they're like, things aren't really working. We're kind of stuck. We need some help. And unfortunately, there are some cases where it's just like, you should have come to me 6 months ago. Right now we need to call the administrators. But I see that a lot with brands who don't focus enough on new customer acquisition. And a lot of that is because they're using outdated strategies. They're relying too much on advertising. There's a lot of overlap in their campaigns. And they're just not focusing enough on bringing new people into the funnel. Whereas as someone who has been in marketing for a long time, I'm a big believer in the fact that there is a customer journey. There's a beginning, middle, and end of that. You have awareness, consideration, conversion, and you need to make sure that you are allocating resources to each stage of that customer journey. Unfortunately, one of the big things which came about in 2017 with a lot of performance marketers in e-commerce, back when there was much less competition, was that you could put all your money into conversion campaigns because of that was pre-iOS 14. There was less competition on there, and you'd be able to get a pretty good result from there.
Sure.
But that's changed now, as the algorithms change, as their ability to target people beyond 7 days changes, and also as there's more competition as well. And you need to think more full funnel. So it's those brands who are still stuck in that 2017, 2019, even like COVID mindset of just like pumping all their money into purchase, who are the ones who see that biggest drop off because they're not bringing enough new people in there to become brand aware before they intend to purchase.
Obviously, you run a performance agency and help brands with their ads, but also their strategy. What are your thoughts on how much you should rely on an agency versus in-house when it comes to, say, these critical channels of Meta?
I'm trying to be unbiased here. Look, I've worn both hats. I've worked in-house, and I've also obviously owned.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask you, because I think you do
Yeah.
always have unbiased thoughts. I mean, of course, you're in the game and you work with brands, but this is why brands work with you, is because they know that you just get the unbiased thought. This is my thought. This is the truth. You make the decision.
Yeah, I kind of just say whatever's on my mind.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Look, it depends on the brand, and it depends on what resources you have.
Yeah.
And there's also what you're good at and what you can actually allocate that time and resources to. And that's it. Like, everything is an opportunity cost.
Yep.
You could learn how to do Meta and Google yourself, but what's the opportunity cost of that? Because if you're a founder or you're a small team, there's other things you also could be doing as well. You could bring someone in, but then you've got that additional headcount as well. When I was working at Riderware, we did everything in-house. Matter of fact, when I started there, we fired the agencies because what I realized at the time was that the agencies we were working with didn't really understand e-commerce. They didn't really understand that whole full funnel marketing journey. So they weren't a good fit for us, and I brought someone in who I knew I'd worked with previously, who could do that. But I was fortunate in that because I knew exactly someone I could trust. I understood the platforms well enough to be able to bring someone in that I was confident managing it in-house. Whereas other brands who don't have that luxury, who don't necessarily understand the tech, don't understand the intricacies and the nuances of it, or perhaps are a little bit leaner, maybe that's not something you actually need to be running in-house. The benefit of agency is obviously you work with a team who are exposed to a lot. Yep. They're generally at the forefront of everything which is happening on all the platforms because that's what they live and breathe every single day. Whereas if you are sort of dabbling in it, there are things you're going to miss as well.
You need someone that is absolutely obsessed with that channel.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you don't have that in-house because the founder is floating between so many different things, you're going to do well at it, then you'll focus on something else, and then Meta will die, and then you'll come back to it, and then something else will die. And I feel like it's this game of this, like, someone needs to be obsessed about it.
Yeah, at the end of it, everything needs an owner.
Yes.
And if I look at, going back to one of your early questions around what's the big mistake, which I see a lot of brands do as they start growing, is that when you're a small brand and you've got a team of like 3 or 4 people, everybody owns everything, right? Everyone is obsessed with it. But when you get up to like 10 plus people, that starts to change, and that ownership and that accountability can quickly fade, and people don't feel ownership anymore, and they actually start becoming more task monkeys.
What would you say is like the size of brand that you mostly work with today? It varies.
It varies quite a lot. There's some who with 50 plus people, there's some with 4 or 5 people, there's some sort of in between.
So for a brand that maybe has like, let's just say 20 to $30 million of revenue,
yep.
What do you think the team should look like?
Oh, great question. I'm working with a brand right now, which is a super lean team. They're a $30+ million business with 10 staff.
Okay.
So super lean, super efficient. They work with agencies.
And what does that team structure look like? Is it like creative, or is it operational? Is it like, have they outsourced a lot?
Yeah, they've got a creative team. So they've got an in-house creative team. They've got a marketer who kind of just like oversees everything. I work with them as a fractional CMO.
Okay.
They've got an operations manager, and they've got their e-commerce manager.
Do you think creative is the way to stand out?
Yes.
Like, you would double down on that early?
Right now, purely from an advertising perspective and also just a brand perspective, you do need that. You need to understand what makes you special. Because if you don't stand out, then why would people think about your brand? There's this marketing theory around the 95-5 rule.
Okay.
In that at any given moment in time, only 5% of your customers are actually in market to buy, which means that there's 95% of your customers who are your potential customers, but they're not ready to buy yet. How do you speak to them? And you need to have a message out there which they are going to understand and is going to stick with them, so that when they do move into that 5% who are going to buy, they're going to be brand aware.
Yes.
They're going to have the mental and physical, the mental availability for your brand.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what we do, like I said before, is that we focus so much on that 5% who are going to convert right now. We forget about that other 95%. But how do we speak to that other 95% so that when the time comes and they realize, hang on, I'm ready to buy XYZ, you're one of the brands they think of, because we buy from memory and we buy from emotion.
Winning the awareness game. I think it's incredibly important. A lot of people know you for your work at Ecom Nation more recently and now, and it's just crazy how many brands speak so positively about the work that you do with them. It's wild. We obviously work with so many of them and have so many collaborative brands, and they do. And I think you're very influential on their overall strategy, and it's obvious why. But more on you, like Ecom Nation grew incredibly quickly in the first 6 to 12 months. New brands, revenue, you posted about that, shared about it. Like how? Why are people working with you?
I think people work with us because of the reputation of myself and Paul Waddy, my co-founder, because we've been in the trenches. We know what retailers have gone through, and we know the strategies which you need, and the strategies and the habits and the behaviors you need to be able to build a successful, sustainable, profitable business.
Yep.
And I think it's that retailer mindset which really sets us apart, that most of our team come from retail backgrounds.
Yep.
We deliberately look out for people who have worked in-house at retailers before, because they understand more than just managing ads or managing Klaviyo or managing Instant, what the business actually needs.
What's the gap in the industry you're trying to fill?
For me, it's about making sure that retailers have a really good, trusted partner to work with who actually has the best interest
someone on
at heart.
their team.
Yeah, who isn't just focused on, we need to spend more on ads because that's how we take a clip of that, to actually working with you to understand, what are your business objectives? What are your margins? How do we optimize this account to be able to help you meet those objectives rather than just spending money?
Yes.
So we like to get really deep with our clients and really help them feel that we're an extension of their team.
Know the founder, know the brand,
work really closely with the team. Like, we are in their Slack, we are on everything with them. So.
Couldn't agree more. I think that it's. And you mentioned something before around, you wish a lot of brands came to you 6 months earlier than when they do. When you do jump into a brand and they first start working with you, what are like the first 3 metrics you start to look at?
First 3 metrics, AOV, conversion rate, and sessions.
Why?
Because they are the 3 drivers to revenue.
What are the metrics that most businesses get caught up in that just don't matter when you're trying to get something on track?
ROAS.
Yeah. Okay.
In-platform ROAS, simple as that. Yeah, the number of, no one ever gets into business to say that I want a 10 ROAS. This is why I got into business. So you got into business to make money. Yeah. Right? So
make money and build something you're proud of, and a brand you love.
Yeah. When they're thinking just on ROAS terms alone, without actually looking at the big picture, you kind of miss the point of it. Whereas I start with those 3 metrics because if you look at your daily sales is a combination of all 3.
Yes.
And if it changes, it's usually because one of those has changed or a combination of those have changed. And then you kind of reverse engineer that. It's sort of like root cause analysis. You kind of go back and go, okay, well, why did that change? Yeah, and understanding what's the cause and then figuring out how do you then treat that.
It's incredibly hard in your role to be super obsessed with so many brands at once, but you guys just crack it. And I think a big part of that, honestly, from my perspective, is you've been in the trenches before. Like you said, you know what it takes to build a brand. And I honestly think that is the most important thing to look for when you work with someone like yourself or an agency or whether it's performance marketing or someone to build your website. Like do they truly know what it takes to be a founder, to build a brand, etc. To wrap up, what would you say are like the biggest growth unlocks that are unlocked, that are overlooked moving into 2026?
The biggest growth unlocks for 2026, the number one I would say is looking within your team and looking at how do you unlock the excess capacity within them. There's a great book called Multipliers by Liz Wiseman, which talks about how do you motivate people to work beyond what they think is possible, right? And I think with a lot of teams, particularly as they grow, they lose that sense of mission, that sense of purpose, that sense of alignment.
Yep.
if you can unlock that, you can unlock significant growth. One of the brands I work with this year, every month this year has been a record month.
Wow.
And Black Friday this year, we're looking at this number now going like, how the hell are we going to beat that next year? it's just like completely blew away all our expectations, which is fantastic. And we did that with the exact same team, but it came about because we changed the makeup of the team. We changed how the team worked together, made them really aligned on the same things. We changed meeting cadences. You know, we did a lot of things to change the systems, the processes behind that so that we can get a high performing team. We didn't do it by putting in more resources or spending more on ads. Actually, we spent less on ads this year as a percentage, but we did it by actually getting more out of the team, by having the team focus more and do better
What were
work.
the rituals that you implemented? Like,
yeah, one of them is actually looking first of all at data, and actually making sure that everyone in the business was totally aligned with where
let's get
we
away
were.
from the opinions and just data tells the story.
Yeah, but everyone knows exactly how we're tracking. The second was around ownership, making sure that every single member of the team knew exactly what they were accountable for. Previously, there were people who were doing a lot of different things. They were sending emails, they were updating the website, they were writing blogs, and there was no ownership of that. And this is a 60-person business. They were doing so many different things that no one person was just accountable to it, and they knew every single day, this is the thing which I just need to fucking crush, because if I crush this, then I'm doing my bit to help us get there. And when we had 60 people suddenly now going like, I come to work every day and I know this exact same thing, that if I do this, we are going to smash our goals.
Yep.
It just levels everyone else up.
Yes.
Right? Because you know what your contribution is to that business.
All the cogs start turning together, and you know, all the cogs turning together equals an incredible result. Maybe on that point, and touching on kind of the marketing element, what is your definition of an incredible marketer in 2026?
Curiosity, first of all. That curiosity to want to understand what is that consumer behavior, that human emotion which we need to tap into to be able to drive the action which we want. I think that's something which has been lost in this age of very tactical, performance-driven thinking, that we preference people who are able to work on the tools and know how the platforms work rather than knowing how to change behavior.
Mal, thanks for coming on. I think that I could seriously talk all day. There's so many more questions. This might actually be my favorite podcast yet. We got through so much, and, you know, you fluff around in so many podcasts and don't really get, you know, what the fuck are we doing? How are we improving it? Someone's opinion, and, you know, you're always just straight to the point, and, you know, it's clear why you turn up to Online Retailer or Retail Fest and wherever you speak on stage and the crowd's full, because they, you know, people do truly value your thoughts on things, and it's so obvious why. So thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks, Liam.
And looking forward to having you on another episode in the future.
I'd love that.